actually write the book in segments, or did it came as you were working on writing the book? Because I think it's more natural. It makes it real. It makes you connect with it. How this books comes from story to story, and that's how memory works for me. This is how the human experience is. And I would say this book is so Central American, and this is I've got the two. I first read the book in Spanish, and then I got the book in English, and I was navigating into this world, and I because a language is not only a language. It is a world, it is a culture, and it's how it shapes the world the way we see it. So for me, it was very difficult in the beginning because as for me as a survival of immigration, of displacement, for me to read my own stories and to own my story in Spanish is been an act of resistance. So I always been reluctant to read it in English and said, no, no, why would we? Why would we? But it's been interesting because I think this book stands in dialogue with Central American testimonial writing, particularly with writers like Claribel Alegría, who understood that memory is a moral and political responsibility. But she also often writes from a vantage of point of collective history, war and exile and revolution. And I think that Rina shifts our attention inward to the domestic, the intimate, to the history that takes place inside a child's body. I think this fragmentary structure is not simply a stylistic choice, but an ethical one. And if it was intended or not, I think it's powerful because the book refuses to smooth over pain or to impose artificial coherence. I think it respects the way memory insists, returns, and interrupts. It's this abrupt changes in stories. This so heartfelt, is so real. You can feel it. I think it expands historical witness, reminding us that history is not only made in public events, but also in kitchens, in bedrooms, in churches, and in silences. I want to mention too that these books for me speaks a lot because I think in Latin America we all descend from matriarchies. And I have not only the privilege of knowing some of the characters presented in the book, Doña Francisca, which is Rina's mother, La Tia Maria, who is a person that I would say this. A person that my soul fell in love with when I met someone that is a powerful symbol of life and resistance and of resilience as a human being. And these stories weave in between voice, genealogy, and moral complexity. I think one of the strengths of this book is the narrative voice. We hear both the child who lives the experience without fully understanding it, and then the adult. We have the two Reinas here. It reflects without erasing the original confusion. The double voices creates a deep sense of trust between us and who's reading. Rina certainly have opened her heart, haven't you, Rina, in this book? Because you are so honest in this book. It's like boom. I would say that you are giving us something that we need to work more on and is an honest portrayal of women across generations, mothers, grandmothers, aunts, figures who nurture, protect, and love, but also at times produce harm. And that's the reality of life. There's no idealization here. It's not easy moral sorting. And this book reminded me of one of the American authors that I read, that is Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison, this is the kind of, I was thinking this because, my Salvadorian self first, when I read the book, I start thinking about, Gioconda Belli, right? When we speak about the body and pleasure and Marcela Altos Rey and all these Latin American authors. But then I was thinking, who would I say that this book can be, is resonates to in the US culture? So I thought maybe if you have read Toni Morrison, this is one of those kind of books like Toni Morrison reads. And I would say that I have to say this as a theologian myself, and I want to because I think for me it's been a powerful and those personal and this as a Central American human being, it's so powerful to read this book, but it's also so powerful as a theologian, especially as a queer theologian. I know this book, and I have to say this again. This book wasn't written as theology, but it's so powerful. It's so pastoral. I I would say this is a deep theological text. I as a queer theologian, I would say in this book, the body, especially the body of a girl, becomes a site of truth. This is this is what we call the locus theologically, right? And when we're thinking about the theological approach to this book, is exactly that. This is a place is this little girl bodies where consequences of family systems, religious teachings, and cultural norms are inscribed. This powerful image, and this is I've heard these stories too in person from La Tia Maria, which is one of the characters. This image of the either God that is overseeing everything, this God that is not a presence of compassion, but of God of surveillance. This is a moral gaze that produces fear and shame and self-policing. And this is not simply a childhood memory, it is a powerful critique of how certain religious images function in our culture. I would say that this book is so powerful because it invests us in rethink sin and responsibility. The problem is not the child, is not the body, is not desire, is not that this is a lesbian girl. The problem lies in structures, family, religious, culture that fail to protect and enforce silence. In this sense, sin is not individual failure, but structural harm. And this is the powerful. This is, from a queer theological perspective, the book performs what has been called a refusal of respectability. And this is when Marcela Altos Reed comes immediately into my heart. And from a pastoral perspective, I think this book is so powerful because it teaches how healing, it teaches, it gives us a story of healing without triumph. In this book, there's no closing, but honesty. There's a truth being spoken as justice. It's not an accusation, but the moral responsibility of speaking the truth. And I love how the book doesn't bring us to a close. It's just an invitation to speak the truth, even if it's especially if it's uncomfortable, I would say. It is not an accusation, it's a moral clarity. And I think that in these days is a spiritual practice, especially in the days that we're living in. And that's what I wanted to say about the book. And I have some questions. Rina, I don't know if you want to, you'd like to read some of the book for us?
Yes, I would like
Pastora,
to
let us.
thank you for joining us tonight. And thank you, Todd and Jim, for outreaching to have this evening together about In My Heart a Volcano, a book of memoirs and vignettes. I'll read one of the pieces at the beginning, and then I'll talk a little bit about what you are mentioning, which is this structure the book has. I'll mention something, and then I'll let you ask the other questions that will lead this discussion. This is a story about a magical relative, and that part of the book is entitled, if you have it handy, you can find it in page 15, Looks That Kill. Scorpions detect their victims by the vibrations the latter produce. They can sense the skittering of a cockroach over a foot and a half away. My uncle Hermenegildo could put scorpions to sleep with a mere glance. He will look at them, and the little critters will flip over, and they will fall into dream state belly up. Once Diomedes took down a goat by turning his eyes to it. Its owner had refused him permission to pet the little kid. My Aunt Maria, who had witnessed this scene, thought to herself, "This woman has no idea of what's about to hit her." The mighty glance of Diomedes went into action, and he toppled the goat without meaning to do so. His gifted vision, however, could not save him from alcohol. The thirst of his liquor was unquenchable. It led him to grave at the age of 40, entirely spent. My mother claims to possess a potent glance as well. According to her, the fawn will not rise on eggs if she looks at them while she's beating them. Personally, I prefer my uncle's magic power than my mother's culinary calamity. And I structured the book starting by my ancestry, grandparents, my mother, my father, because they shape who I am. They definitely give me the first ideas of the world around me. And so it was very natural to start that way, and the narrative starting that way. And then this was 6 years in the making, this book. So once I sat down with the first draft, I was lucky to find the editing of a good friend in El Salvador who's an anthropologist. Also, he used to work for Monseñor Romero, for San Romero de las Americas, Guillermo Cuellar. And I asked him, would you take a look at something that I had written that needs some editing? And that was probably 3 years ago when we started the editing process with Guillermo. And it was then that things started to take shape, because then he will recommend, I think this story is more powerful if it comes here, and we will discuss it. And that's how it got structured by the editing process. And then he will ask more questions about a particular passage, and then I will write more. And that's how we came to have the first manuscript that then we pitched to the Independent Museum of el Museo de la Imagen y la Palabra y la Imagen, the Museum of, it's a social history museum in El Salvador that decided to publish the book in Spanish, and we launched the book in November of 2024 in El Salvador. But that was the process, so I cannot claim it was brilliancy of my own. I wish I could, but it wasn't like that. It was a process that had a lot to do with the editor. And Alvaro, listening to you talk about the book, I need you to write a book review in Amazon. So please, after tonight, go to write a book review. So what's your other
Ooh,
question?
okay. Well, I have another question, because one of the things I would say, as I said before, one of the things I deeply appreciated is that this book doesn't idealize family or women, and love and harm coexists, right? And this is one of the things that is true. And I would say this runs deeply in Latin American culture. It's uh, I want to ask you, what was it like to write about women you clearly love,
Mhm.
while also naming the harm that was passed on? And that has to do especially with generational trauma, and we carry the trauma of our ancestors. What was it for you?
It was risky and very difficult, just because I didn't want people I love, like my mother, to feel judged by me or by the book. I, given that she had to support our home, she was a single mom. Um, there was a lot of neglect in our growing up, and there were moments in my life where I needed her a lot, and she wasn't there, not because she didn't want to, but because she had to work 16-hour shifts as a nurse, and it was hard. So it was super hard. But at the same time, if I shy away from what my truth was and what this book needed it to contain, then it would have been so superficial, and that's not the way I live my life. My life is an open book, and now it's truly an open book. Uh,
Never more literal.
yeah, and so it wasn't something I could just cut out. And the ugly, the good, the bad, all needed it to be spelled out in a way that it also I feel uh, comes to peace with it, and it comes to peace saying this is life, and sometimes you don't know what turns life is going to have, and then you come to appreciate it for what it is. And then I even say in one part of the book, my imperfect family and I, we have had heal and have find grace in all this. And I think, and now that I done the readings in other places, I always find people who really appreciate that everything is there because they can relate, and then they can
Hmm.
also find a way to talk about it.
Sure. Would you say the writing changed how you see them, or how you see yourself in that lineage of
No, actually, I think because it took such a long time, I mean, 6 years in the making, and I was accompanied through the process. I have had therapy. I have had a spiritual direction. I have had personal trainer. It has been an entire team. Um, I think I this has been just my own growing up and conclusions that have also given me a lot of freedom, a lot of peace. And my mother, when she read it for the first time, I was hoping for her not to ask for a copy, but they came the moment when she says, "Where is my copy?" And I gave it to her, and the next day she calls me and she says, "Rinita, my little Rina, Rinita, I had to go to therapy." And this is an 80-year-old Salvadorian woman who has never thought therapy can give you something. And she started going. And so I think something good came out of that confrontation.
Yeah, and this is, this is, I think, is so powerful on this book. It's how it's the honesty and this transparency with which you let us into your heart, and you let us into your family dynamics, into your family history, and you tell us it's I would say it's even elegant the way it weaves into healing. It's just naming things. It's not demanding justice or reparation. It's just acknowledging things. It's just acknowledging the difficulties of relationships. It's just naming what it is, and that's a source of healing. And as you say, this I would say this book is also maybe is the physical expression of your healing. It's a physical. This is how healing looks for some people, for some families, for some lineages. I wouldn't have a doubt about it. I want to ask. I've heard some of these stories in person, and I've heard some of the stories not from you, but also from La Tia, from your mother, and it's so powerful to listen to them from you directly in with this honesty, with this sincereness, And as I said before, in this dancing between you and Reinita, because here you give us you give us Rhina Ramos and then you give us Reinita. And Reinita is this little girl in Nasacamil that I can perfectly see, and the photos that come in the book are so I've seen that apartment. I have visited that apartment. I can smell the trees and the flowers in that garden, and it becomes alive. It's so very powerful, and I think the photos make a great contribution. I would say this story is the story of many. It's many people's stories. It's just not your family, Rina. And this is powerful. It names the truth, and it names, it's very interesting how, it's I loved it from the book too. That was very political. I would say this book is very political in the sense, and it gives us an opportunity to see how you was as the little Renita, this little girl in a developing country, and in the middle of the struggle of these people is trying to understand what communism is,
Mhm.
and all these ideals that suddenly become yours, and you don't really understand, but you see the joy of dreaming of liberation. You see, you're inspired by your father's dreams and poems of liberation and all the struggle of liberation. And that's the Rinita that has become Rina, the liberator now these days. And so it's a very powerful to be able to see, to go into the origin of where everything started, and how in this heart that's also a volcano, the magma of liberation was, becoming, it's where everything started. It makes to know you, and to then to read the book, you can say, oh, that makes sense. That's a very powerful move. There's a very powerful stories between you and your father, and birthday cakes and everything in the book that's so powerful. I wouldn't be a theologian if I wouldn't want to move to a theological question. And I want to speak about this that you gave us. Many readers, especially those of us raised in religious and moral frameworks, may recognize the image of what you call the eye of God. Not God as a presence, but God as a surveillance. And I don't perceive this. This is you're speaking about, spiritual violence, speaking about spiritual and religious uh oppression. It's the story of your grandmother is so powerful. Is so real. These women shaped by shame, by religious prejudices, by all these things that diminish life, and have you survived them, and how they shape how you became as an adult religiously. I love how you said became a Baptist fanatic. It's just like, oh my God, it's just like you were the reflection of that upbringing from your grandmother. And I don't, even if, there's a lot of critique, and it's not, it's implicit, it's just, you're not naming it, to religious structures, religious prejudices, religious control, religious trauma. I don't hear this as an attack on faith, but I would say a very, very honest examination of how certain images of God shape conscience and fear. And I have a question. The question is, at what point did you begin to distinguish between that I and your own sense of what is the divine now, what is sacred or trustworthy in life? Where did it start, Rini?
I believe that my coming out was so pivotal in me understanding an expansive, full of grace, full of love God. If I wouldn't have understood a God that was beyond the rigidity of my growing up, the rigidity of the fanatism that I had embraced, When I arrived to the United States and became a born again Baptist, if I wouldn't have embraced the grace of God, I wouldn't have been able to live with myself as a lesbian who also claimed her Christianity. I remember when my husband and I decided to separate and we had to go to the deacons and pastor of my church because we held leadership positions in church and we were looked at as an ideal couple. One of the questions my pastor or my then pastor asked me was, what's going to happen to your eternal life? And that was a way of saying, you are going to hell. Have you thought of that? And I remember at the time not having any idea what was coming next, but answering to him, I'm going to trust God's grace. And up to this date, God's grace has been immense and it has given me a life that I had never thought of living into a ministry that is accompanying the realization of others that they are also perfectly divinely created and that they don't have to leave behind their gender expression, their sexual orientation, or any of who they are. So that to me was a breaking point because I I was I was broken to humility. I had to become humble because the person I was similar to the people who uses religion right now to feel superior to others. It was a weapon to feel superior and to feel like everybody else was a sinner. So the minute I had to take on God's grace and I was a sinner that needed that, not because I was a sinner for being a lesbian, but a person, a mortal, a human being, then I had to open my eyes, start deconstructing. But this idea of God started so early. I remember being one of those mystic little weird children that like communion. I used to love being in church. I used to love the ringing of the bells when Jesus was coming into the elements. And I used to be 4 and 5 year old and pray to God to come into my heart as he was coming in the elements. Don't ask me where. Maybe it was looking at my grandma praying all the time. But this mysticism is something that has always been part of who I am. And so I think sooner or later, God and I will have an encounter like the one that Jacob had, and until Jacob says, I'm not leaving you until you bless me. And hold on to that angel for dear life because I needed that in my life to come out of a life that wasn't mine. I was living a life that I remember once I realized my lesbianism wasn't going anywhere. I used to go to church thinking, why am I cursed? Why am I in this church feeling so condemned? And I would look around and look at the other ladies and say, I bet they aren't lesbians or aren't being tempted by lesbianism. It's just me. And why just me? And so it was that breaking point, coming to realization God loves me entirely, absolutely, and that's all I can preach from then that point on to others.
Mm, interesting. Thank you, Rina. I would say, it's I in this chapter, and there's one of the stories of the book in which you're sharing that you used to you pray the gay away from you, and this is how you would, dedicate these fastings to God and everything. And it is so powerful because I can just imagine, how how we as what can we say we as queer people of faith, how we have been, smashed down with this rhetoric of God
I
doesn't
think we
love us.
need to read, and we need to read that part. Let
Yes,
me
you should. You
find it.
should. You should, Rina. I
Yeah,
think
this
it's
is.
so powerful.
Let me
If
see.
you haven't read the book, I will not tell you how Rina,
No, but I
was
gonna
dealing
read
with
it.
fastings, but then you will hear it here.
Let's hear it here. Uh-huh. Mhm. I think. Continue talking, Alvaro. I like it. You say.
What do you mean? No, I'm just waiting because this is just so amazing, and she never made something that reflects
Yeah.
that experience of grace.
I know. Ta-da-da, ta-da-da, ta-da-da. Mhm. I became a fanatic and homophobic evangelical Christian. I went out to campus bus stations to evangelize on Saturday mornings. I tried to convert people to the form of Christianity that I was practicing. And as I had always been very audacious, I would approach them sternly and ask them, have you accepted Jesus as your Lord and Savior? Repent. I had always said that my first job as a community organizer was my mission to save souls from hell. In the church at the age of 19, I married a Salvadorian man from Morazan. He was a good man and was by my side during the years when I was studying to become an attorney. He always believed that I would accomplish it. Whenever I had a difficult exam, he would pray together with me. The truth is that with him, I experienced a lot of personal growth, but little by little, I was realizing that the life I was living was not the one I wanted it to live. At the age of 26, I couldn't tolerate it any longer. I sat down to have a talk with the man who was then my husband, and I told him, when I embrace you, I want to embrace a woman. As a good Christian couple, we turned to prayer, looking for direction. We decided that we can seek counsel, but it had to be from a Christian like ourselves. So this person will not lead us astray. We were lucky because we found a pastor who was not only a pastor, but a clinical psychologist as well. That fine man helped me recognize that I was not possessed by any demon, that I was experiencing was just a human condition of being homosexual. I cannot find it, but it's okay.
Okay, so
It
then I
has
will
to do.
say,
I'll tell you what it was. When I was fasting, trying to pray the gay away, all I could think of was roasted chickens. So I will see roasted chickens turning while I was fasting. So my wife always says to me that the chicken turned me gay. So that's that chapter there somewhere. But it's the roasted chickens that always will want. I will want to break that fast so bad to have a piece of chicken.
can you imagine the Rina praying in a pew and the
Yeah,
rotisserie chickens going around? It's so powerful. It's a
believe
powerful
me, those are
image.
your prayers too. I bet
Okay,
you.
here it is. Miguel and Todd says chapter begins on page 98.
98.
Okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
See, they know it, but see. Okay, here it is. So I began myself in post-torture. I tried to battle myself and my sexual orientation. Many years would go by before I could accept myself as a lesbian. I prayed so hard that the attraction to other women would be lifted from me. This feeling, which was condemned from the pulpit of the church I attended, tormented me. There were times when I offered 24-hour fast along with prayers that I be delivered from feeling attraction toward women. But all I can went through my mind while I was fasting and praying was roastery chickens. I thought the hours in the lead up to midnight would never end so that I could break my fast and eat. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Mhm. God bless rotisserie chicken. Yes.
Yes, yes.
Rina, your writing is very precise and restrained, even when describing deeply painful experiences. How did you decide how much emotional distance the language needed in order to survive the act of writing?
It wasn't something I was thinking it every minute. I was writing, and then I will think, oh my God, I will laugh with it. I will be, oh, this is so funny. Oh my God. And then, I will put a line there that will just make me laugh at myself and laugh at the situation. So I don't think I was trying to lighten it up. It's just how I am. I mean, and I think it's a very Salvadorian thing. They always tell us that Salvadorians like make a joke of the worst case scenario. They always,
Yes.
it's a part of like just all right. The absurdity of life is so bad that it gets absurd, and then uh, it's part of not taking your sales so seriously because that doesn't mean you don't feel the pain or explain the pain, but you just too are are the victories, the challenges, the failures. You are all this. Life is that complexity.
Which takes me to the next question. I think it's so difficult sometimes to locate ourselves in life either as witnesses or survivors. And when we speak about all these painful, difficult things, displacement, um, um, poverty, neglect, we sometimes we choose what place we locate ourselves, either as a witness or as a survivor. It depends on how much we have healed, I think. And I often felt that the book trusts us as readers. And I think the book um I want to ask you, as a writer, how do you understand your responsibility toward readers when you're telling such intimate and painful truths? Because it's you certainly open your heart and you let us in.
Yeah. Well, see, I feel that the minute you decide if you are a survivor or you are somebody who
Witness.
a witness or somebody who overcame, the minute you get to decide that you have privilege. Because when you are surviving, you have no privilege in the question. You are the person trying to make you to live through a situation. So when you are in that position as a child, as an immigrant, you are surviving just because life is not letting you thrive because systems and political governments are putting you down. So there is no choice for you but to be in survival mode. So I think the minute that you can separate and decide what role you are in is a lot of privilege. So I now have the privilege to write about this. I have the privilege to have the support I need if I need to
Mm.
recuse myself and take care of myself and take myself to a great meal or if I need that I have the resources that I never had at the time. So I think because of that I was courageous enough to write the way I did. and put there, surviving a war, sexual abuse survival, religious drama, all that without saying, oh, I'm victorious. I'm just somebody who went through it, and I bet hundreds of people have gone through it.
Mhm. After this book, are there memories or questions that still resist language for you? Are things that you choose not to include or still feel unfinished? How do you
Well,
feel what remains
I
unsaid?
couldn't include my brother because he will sue me. So he had to stay out. I'm waiting until
If you haven't met Rina's brother, he's such a character.
yeah. So I couldn't include everything that we live together because my
Mhm.
grandparents, they have all passed away, so they're not gonna come and get me. Um, and well, my mother and my aunt, they feel very happy and actually hold a lot of pride that their lives are being told too, because they are such an amazing duo. They raised not just my brother and I, but they raised other cousins and extended family, because my uncles were machistas, machos who just had kids without uh, taking care of the consequences of providing for them. So it was my aunt and my mother who had to do that, and that is why my aunt immigrated to the United States and started paving the way for the entire family to come north. To the point, and you will find it in a book, that she accompanied my brother and I when at the age of 14 and 13 to make sure we were accompanied through the trajectory from El Salvador through Guatemala through Mexico and cross the border undocumented. So uh, I think everything needed to be included. I'm about to go and study break, as they call it, a study leave at work. I'm gonna go 2 weeks to Colombia to brainstorm a second book, which probably not gonna be a memoir, but it will include some of the questions that maybe were provoked by the first writing. So I'm looking forward to doing that. I mean, I know it takes a long time to produce a book, so I don't see that's coming anytime soon. But I know there are questions still that stay, from having written this book.
Hmm. I have one last question, and my last question is if this book is not only about remembering, but also about responsibility. And as I've said before, I think this book is a powerful tool, and this is how healing and some justice look for some people. And it brings a lot of things to the surface emotionally. It served to me as a reflection of my own family relationships. It spoke about my own stories about immigration, about my own stories of displacement, my own stories of survival. And I think it's as you said, we read these books from positions of safety and privilege. I want to ask, what is it that you hope readers find in this book, especially those who read from a place of safety and privilege? And what would you invite people to notice or to do differently?
This is thank you for this question. So the Spanish version, when I have done readings of the Spanish version, I want to connect with people who might have gone through the similar situations, that can relate to pieces or some of the stories and some of the narratives, and that they can feel that their stories are important to be told. So every time I'm sharing this in Spanish, my hope is that people know and give themselves permission to own their stories. And I have been asked that, and I said, even if writing is not your mechanism, record them. We have so many ways now to have our stories, because people are walking around with things that they want to share about their struggles, their triumphs. And so when I'm doing it in English to probably a group like tonight, I want people to reflect on the different intersections of the immigrants that uh, are being portrayed as thieves, as drug dealers, as this and the other, and they can see, you know, we are simply another person that comes to this country with so much richness, and that we can enter that dialogue of seeing one another. Um, so, because I think stories humanize the issue. The minute that you start listening to somebody, you probably open your heart, and then you start seeing the humanity on those things that sometimes feel remote or foreign, or stereotypes start to break once you see and hear stories.
Hmm. I take a deep breath, and I thank you, Reina, for sharing your story so honestly, so lovingly, so responsible of others, and for this amazing person that you are. You are a vessel of grace, and as you have experienced grace, there's one thing that I disagree with you on in the book. And as you said, that's at the very end of your book, you said that you're even if your heart inside your heart there's a volcano, the volcano is tamed. I don't like. I don't know about that. I think your heart is a volcano who is in full eruption all the time, all the eruption of love, eruption of you're always this magma, as I said, from a previous chapter in which where everything generates all these ideas of liberation, of justice. And as you said, who would have said that I will be preaching for justice? This girl, this Renita, that was, singing all these songs about liberation and jumping in bed and listening to your father's inspiring stories of liberation and of social transformation and change would actually become a preacher for justice. I I have to say I I'm one of the recipients of the grace that God decided to that flows from your hearts because God decided that, and for that I am so thankful. It's a real honor, and I cannot wait for your second book. Wow, maybe it will be more stories about Renita. We don't know. We'll see. We'll see what comes. But thank you, Rina, and thank you, Jim. And with this, I end my participation, and I think we'll have some more questions and answers in the box. Maybe we have here. Well, it's Jim Mitowski. If you want to read yourself, it says, I had the privilege to visit El Salvador with Rina a few years ago before the book. Would you do a tour with the book now that it is out, or how will it be received in El Salvador?
Actually, it was well received because that's where it launched. It launched in El Salvador, and we presented it in two places. First, in the museum that is the publisher, the Museum of the Word and Image, de la Palabra y la Imagen, is the museum that preserves the history of the massacre of the indigenous population in 1932. It's the museum that preserves the Civil War archives and footage. And the person who established this museum is the voice of the clandestine radio that used to transmit from the mountains, being an alternative to the information the government was broadcasting in the national station. And so I had the amazing privilege of having Santiago, who is the founder of this museum, to say yes to this project and back up the book. And so we presented it at the museum in November 2024, and it was wonderfully received because, as I told one of the interviewers at that time, we had some media coverage, and as I said, one of the interviewers, this is the extraordinary tales of a very ordinary family. We were no superheroes. We were one of the many families in El Salvador of the 80s that had relatives fighting the revolution and had relatives fighting in the government side because families were often divided. And I said, I truly believe we weren't anything special or peculiar. We were just people that went through these times, and some of them were lucky to survive it. So it was well received, and then we took the book to a town um, that is very colonial, that has a cultural center, and we did a presentation there, and the audience was mostly people like my grandma. It was a lot of ladies, elderly ladies, and I was terrified. I'm like, oh my God, they're gonna think I'm blasphemous. But they too uh, found some of the passages funny and hilarious, and were able to engage with it. And so those are been the two presentations. I did just one small presentation this past time. I was in El Salvador in November. But yeah, I have had that chance, and then now every time I go to a conference or go to a particular trip, and if I have friends in that town, I ask, hey, would you be interested in a reading? And that's how the book has been touring around.
And you've also took it in tour here in the US, right? Not only Central America,
Yeah,
not only
that's
in El
how
Salvador.
it happens, because it happens if I even had a reading in Mexico City that went really well at a queer bookstore,
Not only at the queer
through
bookstore,
a
the
contact.
one, the best, the only,
Well,
the
the
historical
think the
queer library.
Castro bookstore. Uh,
Yes.
so it went there because a connection say talk to them, and they were very open doors, and I had a reading there in March of last year. So I've been lucky in finding the reception of people who want these readings, and tonight is an opportunity too, that that if anybody wants to have a book reading in your churches and other places that are represented here tonight, I'll be happy to do it. I enjoy myself doing this, as you might tell.
Yes, I would say, Rina, and with this, I promise I shut up. I Volcano My High should be read as a non-systematic but deeply normative theological text for Latin American feminist and queer theology. God is not vigilance, but in the word that dares to be spoken. This is where we can find the divine in this book. And I really want to thank you for this invitation that this book makes for me to reconsider how I understand memory, responsibility, faith, and care. And
Thank you
that's
so much, Alvaro. I love you, and thank you so much for being so studious. My goodness, go and write a review, please.
I wonder how many of us knew we were reading a queer feminist liberation memoir. But we
Well,
have. How awesome. The churches that Pastor Jim and I companion Congregational Church of the Peninsula and Danville Congregational Church have placed this book in conversation with us with a month-long series during Epiphany, which is a migration story on migration, not just the physical act of migration, but the spiritual act of migration. And this memoir, it's a migration story, and not just immigration. You talk about your journey through healing after sexual abuse, and your journey to accept your full self in the coming out process and who you are, your religious journey, your own spiritual journey, where you are today beyond where you have immigrated to. And so I just wondered if for a moment you could talk to us about that theme of migration that is so abundantly clear and vulnerably and generously shared with all of us.
Well, I love the way you put it. I didn't know it was a recurring theme, but now that you say it, I'm like, yeah, that makes total sense. And I love that that is something there. But I ask ourselves, like, becoming a person of conscience, of social conscience, didn't take one day. It didn't happen from one day to the other. We all have been shaped to come to this conversion, to this migration of a spirit, from going to places of closeness to places of openness. I think is the invitation is that this human moving and growing is something that we ought to do while we are alive, because if we stop, then life has to stop. So
Right.
I think that it's it's precisely that, the something that connects us is the way, people hate the uh, being woke. I think you didn't just wake up one day, right? It's what was it that broke your heart to make you more loving? What is it that broke your heart to make you open up to things that you thought you couldn't possibly comprehend? I know that when I started working with young people, LGBT young people in the public schools, I was terrified of working with young people because I had never done it in my life, and I did it for 4.5 years in my previous job in the nonprofit sector. And I remember telling one of my young organizers, I said, well, what am I going to do? They're going to think I'm ancient, that I'm a grandma. What, how young people are going to look at me. And he said, all you need to do is to love them. And I thought, oh, easy enough. That's all I have to do. And then young people really, really, in those 4.5 years, taught me so much about living into their truth. Oh, the trans young people that I met that were 14, 15, and were even in the Central Valley being out to be genuine with who they were, who they are. So I think that migration, I don't claim it as my own, but I'm glad it's there and it can be perceived. But I think we owe it to ourselves. We owe it to ourselves.
And that shows up in your ministry as you have accompanied people of trans experience through their journeys, not only in just becoming who they know themselves to be, but also making a place, making sure there is a place for them to bring the spiritual component and it be honored and reflected.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to get to Doug's question and then we'll go back to Jim's question. Doug asks, what was your experience like dealing with U.S. immigration officials after your initial entry into the U.S.? Was it as fearful for you as it seems to be for immigrants today. And he's
Oh,
going to read your book.
yes. Oh, yes. Listen, I when we enter the first time that we tried to cross the border, we were caught by border patrol and had in custody for one night and then thrown back to Tijuana because at the time they didn't have you. I mean, we're talking 45 years ago. So we weren't detained in a detention center. We were thrown back. The border patrol, and we told them that we were Mexicans, and although we were Salvadorians, they throw us back to Tijuana, and then we try crossing again, and the next attempt with a different set of smugglers was successful, and that's when we ended up staying in U.S. territory. And so we crossed from Tijuana to San Diego and then made our journey to New York, where my mother was waiting for us. And that's when life in the U.S. started. But we were so terrified because the first three years of my life in the U.S. was as an undocumented immigrant. So my aunt, who had been in the States for a longer time, will warn us and say, if you see a white man in a raincoat, walk the other way because it's La Migra, it's Homeland Security. Don't trust that white man in a raincoat. Well, Long Island has many white men in raincoats, and it's so hard to not spot them. And then you're like, where am I going to hide? And then my aunt, too, was convinced that the FedEx, those bands, because it says federal, she thought federal meant government. So she was like, those bands, they caught you, they take you, they deport you. So we will see a FedEx band with my brother and we will run. We will run because they thought, and I was like, they carry packages, but my aunt had me convinced they carried immigrants. So it was scary. Being an undocumented person is scary. You think you're going to be deported. You don't want to be back trying to cross the border. I have told my aunt, if they ever send us back, I'm not coming back. That journey through the border, through Mexico, was so hard and stressful and dangerous. I don't know how we made it alive. And I was convinced if they throw us back, I wasn't going to come back. Locally, 3 years after being in the U.S., my aunt adopted us because we were still minors, and she started the adoption right away. And that's how we became green card holders. And then later on, we went into becoming citizens. And this is part of why my name in the book is Rhina Mercedes. I have had 4 sets of last names. I started with Rhina Mercedes Rodriguez Majano. I came to the U.S. and my aunt changed our names to Rhina Mercedes Campo Flores. And then I decided I didn't want a Campos because it was a former spouse of my aunt that nobody in the family liked. So when I married, I got my last name from my ex-husband, Ramos. By the time I had finished law school, I was Ramos in everything, and I decided to stay with it. But then I went back to El Salvador, and my grandpa says, listen, Rodriguez is a made-up last name. Our real last name is Martinez, and I made up Rodriguez because I was an orphan. And then I thought, goodness, for God's sake, I don't know what my name is. So I know for sure Rhina Mercedes is what I have kept all through my life. So I'm like, if I'm writing a book, those are the 2 names that are going in. So that explains the name.
So friends, that's the bonus insider information you get on this book because you in this Zoom. Rhina, Jim asks your thoughts about if you think it's easier for people to be queer in El Salvador than it was when you left there 45 years ago, or how is it different if it is?
Yeah, and I would like Alvaro to also be part of this answer because he has personal experience as he only immigrated 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago, but it's very recent and he was also leading an inclusive faith community in El Salvador, and our communities are sister communities. We help each other. Um, it's not under the current government. The community had organized themselves, and they were making progress. It was some change had happened to the extent that there was a pride march that was, for 16 years now, 16, 18 years now, there has been a pride march. And the community was trying to pass a law to have the trans community be able to change their markers and their names. There were so many things advancing, and then this government that's very conservative, very right wing, took everything, and now institutions, organizations are suffering, are closing doors. Any language that has to do with gender has been, or gender or sexuality has been eliminated from government documents and from educational books. It's terrible right now. Yes, the community is organized and is more visible than it was when I was growing up, because I didn't have a reference of people openly gay when I was growing up there in the early 80s. Now there are, but it's a community that's being persecuted, and I will let Alvaro talk a little bit more about it.
Thank you, Rina. I want to say too that I am so curious about this Erika trans person in your book that I like, who is she? I want to see her. And then I just want to add, there's is a back and forth when it comes to where we are on LGBTQ rights, and um, we move one step ahead and we come back two steps. It's this is a dance, but in between this, the struggle that is so alive, and as Rina described, the current political climate of LGBTQ persons in El Salvador, if everybody, the movement and everything was not organized, there's hope. And and let me tell you why. This week I was speaking with a friend in El Salvador, and he was telling me this. This is a gay man that is above 35 years old, and he's very prejudiced. And he grew up in San Salvador, in the city, and everything. But he's very prejudiced, very internalized homophobia still, and everything. But he's, had I would say, a full life, a very satisfying life as a gay man. But he told me this. I was the other day walking in Antiguo Cuscatlán in their park. There's a small town in near San Salvador City, the capital of El Salvador. And it was 9 p.m. and everybody was in the park, and, a regular night in Central America. And suddenly there were two young boys. I would say well, not really young boys. They were like 15 and 18 years old, and they were hugging each other, and they were kissing each other peacefully in the park in Antiguo Cuscatlán at night, as families were playing, as people were buying, and life continued. And he told me, if only we would have had that when we were growing up. If only we would have seen people, queer people, being happy around us. So I would say the conditions are not the best, but there's hope.
We are really grateful that you have shared this journey with us, both of you, each of you individually, and then the special chemistry of having the two of you together. I want to encourage people separately, really, to invite Alvaro to preach at your church, if you haven't had him preach, and then also invite Rhina to preach if you haven't had her preach. We've had both of these preachers in Belmont, and we have loved them. And you can have them too. You can arrange for a book conversation at church also, or in your organization, or at your local public library. There's a lot of ways to do this, but we hope that you will buy the book, read the book, tell people about the book. We're doing a book study on it with Foster City Church and Belmont Church in March. So where we'll read it, parts of it together each week, 4 weeks in a row. So there's a lot of ways to do that. Thank you, Alvaro. Thank you, Rhina. And thank you for your ministry and for your testimony. And we look forward to more conversation and more ministry together.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Todd. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody, for spending part of your Monday night with us. Pastor Rhina, Pastor Alvaro, we pray blessings on you both in your ministry and your ongoing vulnerability and strength that is helping us migrate spiritually. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. God bless.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.